Welcome to the Naked Truth About Gardening. Many people have asked me, why naked? Naked is the perfect word to describe the relationship between nature and humans. The basic premise of our show is that interaction with nature is essential to human health. Scientists cannot explain it, but clinical studies have proven that people who garden and interact with nature live longer, stronger, healthier lives than those who don't. Just viewing nature for 15 seconds 10 times a day can reduce mental fatigue, lower blood pressure, and place your mind in a recuperative state. Everywhere I go, people tell me, I don't garden. I can't grow anything. Every plant I touch dies. I believe anyone can grow plants once they know how. Even confessed plant killers can learn the simple skills needed to sustain plant life. Like fashion, every gardener has their own style. How you grow plants is as unique to you as the clothes you put on every morning. This show is different from other gardening programs. In fact, the plant growing techniques presented may challenge traditional gardening practices. We will explore this ancient art of growing while revealing tips, tricks, and techniques that utilize technology of the 21st century that defines the modern urban gardener of today. I hope to reveal the secret health benefits of growing plants and teach you how to receive those benefits in just a few minutes every week. I know I didn't fully answer the question of why the word naked. Truthfully, we chose the word naked because this show has a reality element to it. It's not polished or perfect. It'll never tell you what's a good thing. It's more realistic, gnarly, buggy, and definitely muddy. So the crew and I would like to invite you on a journey of 1,000,000 miles. A journey that starts with one step. A journey that just might change your life. Typically, when you meet other gardeners, they ask, "Are you a dirt gardener?" Yes, I'm a dirt gardener, so let's go get dirty. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is multi-season gardening. And in order to determine a multi-season of gardening, you first have to define what your season is. The U.S. Department of Agriculture publishes a plant hardiness zone map, and basically it contains information about the climate in your area. You can see one at the bottom of this seed packet here. And the things that this is going to tell you is your first frost day in the spring, which is usually sometime in April, early May, and then your last frost in the fall, which is September, or maybe it's your last frost in the spring and your first frost in the fall. And the number of days in between is your growing season. Now, I know many of us spend all of our time in the spring. It's a feverish pace. We're shopping for what we need, starting our seeds, is the ground ready to go, and trying to start our gardens and get everything going immediately. But you know, there's a second season and a third season for growing plants, which makes growing things very rewarding and exciting. I tease with my mother all the time that mums are harbingers of death. Whenever the mums come into the garden centers, you know, frost is just around the corner. But these simple tips and tricks are going to help you to grow plants and vegetables and fruits well into the cold fall months. So the first thing you need to know is what your growing season is. And if you go to the National Arboretum website, they have a map by zip code of plant hardiness zones. Once you determine what your full growing season is, then you can determine where you are. And that's where you're going to go to your calendar. But first, let's talk about the varieties of plants that are good to grow in your second season of growing. And we're going to say that your spring crops and your midsummer crops are your first crops of the season. And then now that it's the middle of the summer and the heat is on, is when you're going to start planting and sowing and getting ready for that fall crop. Nothing is more rewarding than picking your own potatoes and having mashed potatoes on Thanksgiving, or picking your own string beans and having string beans on Thanksgiving. I mean, pumpkins are all well and good, but there are so many other things for us to grow straight through the fall up into the heavy snow. My grandfather always wants to have the first tomato every year. So when he goes to the store, he buys the one in the pot, it already has flowers on it. But he doesn't understand that it's an early girl variety. So it grows and thrives in a very short amount of time and then piddles out in the middle of the summer. Now, if you look at the back of the seed packet over here, the manufacturer is telling you about the variety of the seed. So this is a summer cucumber. And you can see that the days to germination is 5 to 10 days, and that the days to harvest is 56 days. Now that 56-day period starts after your 5 to 10 days of germination. Now the beautiful thing about starting seeds in the middle of the summer is your germination is really quick. I've never had anything take the full germination time. Most of it takes 2 to 3 days, 5 to 7 days, but it's really quick because this is the optimal growing time. You're not trying to force things with the soil being cold and wet and damp like in the spring. So now that you know 56 plus 5 days is 61 days, you move over to your calendar. And here we have a multi-month calendar. There's also a wheel, a date wheel that you can use. You'd have to go to the website to see it. But you would pick it would be your first frost date in the fall based upon the information that you got on the National Botanical Garden website. Or, if you Google it, it can be the growing seasons are mapped out throughout the entire world. So no matter where you are, that information is available to you. And then you would count back 61 days from that frost date. So I know, based upon my last 15 years of journaling and keeping records, that my first frost date in the fall is usually right around October 9th, give or take a day or two. So I count back 61 days from October 9th, and then I can plant my seeds, and I know that I will have a crop of cucumbers in that, right around the middle of October, when no one else can have cucumbers, and the cucumbers at the store are now $2 and $3 a pound. So that's a great tip. Watch your calendar and watch your weather. The other thing that we want to talk about when we're talking about having a second season of growing is a microclimate. Every garden has microclimates. The USDA gives us general rules, but there are little parts of our yard. How many of us grow in a raised bed? This is a microclimate for the soil. You've raised the soil up from the frozen earth, and it will warm up faster in the spring. And if you're in a damp area, the water will drain better for your plants. So you're trying to create a microclimate for your soil. Conversely, in the fall, that soil will cool down much quicker. So maybe that's a good idea for some salad crops for your fall crop. Another perfect example of a microclimate is when we plant plants in a southern exposure as opposed to a northern exposure or a southeast exposure or a southwest exposure. As the sun moves around the earth through the different seasons, the angle that it hits your garden changes. So when you hit a southern exposure, that's a microclimate that will keep more light and more warmth on your garden in the fall and winter months. So for example, the front of my house is a southern exposure. I can grow these beautiful zinnias there in the fall and in the spring, but in the summer, it's way too hot and dry, so I can't put them there. So I'm constantly doing what's called succession planting, and that's every so many weeks I'm starting maybe 10, 15 seedlings so that I can put them in different places in my yard. This extends the bloom and extends the enjoyment of your yard. When talking about microclimates, we have them all over our yard. We just don't recognize them. Here I have the same exact variety of plant, but it is grown in several different microclimates. This was grown in a shady area, and you can see how deep and lush the colors of the leaves are. It even is flowering. The shade has not hindered its growth in any way, shape, or form. Now this one was grown in partial sun. And now look at the variation of color on these leaves. Again, another microclimate. It's beautiful. 3 different colors. And this plant was grown in full sun all day long, 8 to 10 hours a day. And it's very red. It brought out different colors. So as you can see, every person has microclimates in their yard. So you can use these different growing areas or microclimates in your yard to your benefit when you extend the season. So let's talk about this pot here. It's not pretty, and I can hear the producer in the back saying to me, "That's horrible! Cut off all those dead leaves!" But I want to talk about managing our expectations when we're gardening and what is working and what is not working in this pot. This is a multi-seasonal kitchen pot, and it was planted with some cool weather lettuce. And now that the weather has suddenly turned hot, it has gone to bolt. So just cut it out. Just cut the lettuce off and throw it out. Here's some other, you can eat it, obviously. Okay? But when we look further into this pot, we still have plants that are going to grow and fill in. Here we have some basil over the side. Okay? Here, that is 3, that is not 1. And in the middle, we have a cherry tomato. And then in the back, once the parsley is done and the cherry tomato is done, we'll cut these out. We'll bring our basil in for the summer. And so for a simple $9, we've gotten 3 seasons of growing out of 1 pot. You can have the early lettuce crops. You're going to get the mid-season tomato crop, and you're going to have basil all year round. Remember in the beginning of the show when we were talking and I said that this was not a prissy, perfect, polished show? Here's the naked part. We're going to talk about some plants that we purchased, and we're going to talk about growing herbs. Why does every beginner gardener start with growing herbs? Because herbs like neglect. They like poor soil. They like to be forgotten about. So we're going to start today by talking about basil. And here I have 2 basil plants. This is a Genovese basil. And this is a variegated basil. And I have to tell you, variety is the spice and the secret to success in gardening. This is a wonderful outdoor gardening plant. But you know, I like basil all winter long. This is the variety that does better in the house. If you don't know that, you'll take this plant into your house in the wintertime. It will die, just like John's did. And then you'll feel like you can't grow basil. But that's not true. You just didn't pick a basil that was compatible with you. So now that we've picked our basil, because I have an outside and an inside garden, we're going to talk about how to take care of that basil. So here we have some flowers growing on our basil. Hopefully you can see that. I always snip off my flowers. And I'm going to show you where I snip. See how there's a 3 section? I don't know if you can see that. There's a branch going out this way, a branch going out this way, and the flower coming off the top. I take off the middle section, and this way it'll get bunchier. These 2 pieces here will sprout out to the side. I want to find a place where that has happened, okay? So you know it's true, because you have to see it to believe it. So let me just bend all this down. Okay, can you see here? It was snipped. See how it's brown in the middle? It was snipped, and the 2 side shoots came up and made a bushier, fuller plant. Now, many times you're breaking your basil. It's a very tender plant. See how I've broken all this basil off? And you don't want to, obviously you want to eat it because it's delicious. Put it in salads, make yourself a watermelon mojito with it, okay? But the other thing that you can do, it's because it's a tender, thin, delicate, frail little plant. It tends to wilt very easily. It's another great plant to use as an indicator plant in a pot, like such as this. We'll talk about the problems with this pot. Because you'll know when it needs water because it will start to droop immediately before there's actual damage to the plants. So one of the tips I have is this jar. You can go to the website. You can go, I think Amazon has them, your local garden center. But the key to the jar is this mesh top. You unscrew it, you fill it with water, okay? And when you stick your stems into the cool water, the leaves will not go into the water. Oh, we got a little mealybug in there. The leaves will not touch the water, so it won't rot, and this basil will be able to absorb the water and stay fresh longer. So that's a great tip. If you go to the food store and you buy your basil with the roots on the bottom that were hydroponically grown, this is a great way. Immediately cut those roots off and stick it in a jar. You can make your own grid or you can purchase one like this. That is a great money-saving tip. I say it all the time that variety is the spice of life, but it's also a key to success in your garden. Here we have several varieties of hosta leaves. And the interesting fact is that the deer eat different varieties than other varieties. So I wanted to talk about these several varieties. This plain-leafed variety is their absolute favorite. And you can see it has a very glossy leaf and just gentle ribbing through it. That is the first one they go to in my hosta garden. The next one that they go to are the ones with the variegations in them, the white variegations in them. And they'll pick through and eat these. Now, if you look at the back, you can see that the ribbing is a little deeper and more coarse and more fibrous, so it's tougher to chew. And then the next one they go to are these light green ones. And at first I thought they wouldn't go and eat them, but they did. And the reason was because there was nothing else left. But the one variety of hosta, which I love, is a seersuckered variety. And you can see on the back, it's a very deep ridging. And it also has that little bunching and gathering. If they don't eat it right in the very beginning of the spring, when it's tender and the shoots are first coming out, I have never had them eat this variety of hosta. So you can still have the lush tropical foliage of a hosta as long as you pick the right variety. Variety is also important when we're staging our garden and showing off all of our plants. Many times we pick just one variety of the same species to grow in our garden. Take this amber colored. It's very cute. It's not particularly showy. But let's say when we turn it against the lime green, it's really bringing out the beauty of the color of the orange one. And then if you turn it even further and you have the lime green against the dark red, now that's a huge contrast, and it makes this pot more interesting and easier to appreciate. So please, when you're thinking about growing things in your garden, variety is a great way. Hostas are perennial, these are perennial. Plant them like this, and every year they'll come back. I have a few times when we're selecting different varieties of plants, there's one specimen that's outstanding and you want to showcase that specimen. So we talk about specimen planting instead of a variety of planting like we showed earlier, where you have a variety of the same species. This is one such plant where you want to plant it as a specimen planting. It's absolutely gorgeous. Here's another one. That's a specimen plant. And what I like about this plant is see how its understory is actually growing little babies. And when we talk about mulch, they've mulched the top of this with stone, which will help keep it warm at night with thermal mass. So this is another great specimen planting. I could see this bowl just among a gentle ground cover. Looks better this way. And if you look in the very middle, you can see there's a flower about to come out. When growing in the house, we are not above specimen planting. This is a single plant, and it looks gorgeous anywhere. It's very sturdy. The common name is a ponytail plant, and it takes overwatering, underwatering, and it's very showy and beautiful. And I want to thank Hanover Floral for allowing us to use it on the show today. But again, variety can be the spice of life when we're talking about indoor gardening. This is a succulent. They're all in the same family of plants, but doesn't the soft grays stand out better against the harsh reds of this? And can't you pick up the subtle browns on the top from the browns in the soil? And I love the green that complements from the bowl to the jade plant. And by the way, jade plant is an ancient plant, and many believe it brings good health and prosperity. And then you're contrasting that with a different shade of green. This is a lovely combination for the inside of the house that you can view and put yourself into a relaxing, recuperative state. Carol J. asks, I have a low spot and often have trouble with plants dying. Do I need to use containers only? This is a great question, especially when we just spoke about microclimates. Carol, you don't have a problem with plants dying. You have a microclimate. And something you need to know about low spots. Remember, it takes light, heat, and moisture to make our plants grow. So in a low spot, you may tend to have more of a shadow because it's sunken down from the reflections of the sun. In a low spot, you may have excessive amounts of water because they're going to pool to that low spot. And in addition, in the evening hours, especially the spring and the fall, that low spot is going to collect all the cold air in your yard into that low area. So the plants are not dying because it's a low spot, they're dying because it's a microclimate. Grasses and sedges do great in low spots. So does clumping bamboo. I also grow hosta. You should try looking up maybe a bog garden, and that would be a great idea for your low spot. You can have plenty of color and plants that'll last a lifetime. We are so pleased you could join us today. For more gardening information or to connect with gardeners of the globe, go to www.honestgardening.com. If you have specific questions about today's show, you can find me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter. All of us at Down and Dirty Enterprises hope you enjoyed watching the show as much as we enjoyed making it. We hope it's both entertaining and informative, but most of all, we hope you'll join us in the weeks to come. Until next time, stay healthy, stay strong, and happy gardening. What's in store?